The previous lesson, we saw how we can create different statements to execute some JavaScript code. We saw how white space was treated, and we also saw how we can create comments and so on within our source code, so it's more readable and more easily to update as we go back to the script files at a later point. And we also saw how we can communicate with the console log, and we briefly talked a little bit about the Windows object and the document object. So there is actually a way to use the console to read out content from the Windows object, because this, as I said, does get created every time the web page gets created, and this is created within the browser. So we can do a console directory, and we can take that window object. And we see the window object represents the window containing the DOM or the document object model, and we're also going to console directory out the document object model. And when we do take a look at this in the console, you're going to be amazed, if you've never seen this before, all of the information that's contained within there. So when we do a console directory, this is used for objects where we've got this kind of tree-like fashion, and we've got a bunch of objects within other objects, and all of this is available. So the first one that we're looking at, so we see that just like when we output those variable values there in the console, we're console logging out now the window and the document. So let's take a look at the window, and there really is a lot of different methods here. So these are all available, and you can call to any one of these actually using your JavaScript. So all of this is available to access via JavaScript, and I know there's a lot here and it might look like it's overwhelming, but the fact of the matter is you're not going to be probably ever using 99% of these. So these are just, these are there if you do need them, but for the most part we use some of the more common ones. And we see that the alert that we were using there before, so this is a function that's sitting within the Windows object, and we can call to the Windows alert. And as well, we've got a bunch of other options here as well. Within the window, we've got a whole bunch of these on click, on close, and so on. So we can take all of these as actions, events, and we are going to be looking at this because later on, because this is an important part of what's available within the DOM. We can also see that we've got screen left, screen top, so we know our screen position, we know where the scroll position is on the web page, and so on. So we've got all of this information that's ready to use and access. And we've got our window variables, so X and Y are within the window object, so they're contained within there. So we see X and Y is in there. And now back to the document object. So this is different than Windows object because this actually sits inside of the Windows object. And just like the Windows object, there's a whole lot of information here. And this is crucial to understand that this is all there on the ready, and you can access them at any point. We see here that we've got the body, we've got a breakdown of all the different elements that are available to us within the web page. We can access any one of these. We can see the head, so we can see the content that's within the head, and so on. Very important to understand that this is there and we can use it. We can also see when the file was last modified, so really good important information. So let's create our first Windows object, and we've already created an alert. So I showed you how to do alert and then put in some content there, so whatever message you want to output, and this is essentially how we can access that Windows object. We can do this as well to specify that this is a window alert. So either way it's going to produce the same results, but most of the time you're not going to see that people are specifying the window, and the browsers are smart enough to understand that this alert is sitting within the window and it's going to try to run this alert function. So also, as well as the alert, we have some other options as well. So we've got one called prompt, and we've got we can keep that same thing, or what is your name? And the reason I'm formatting it as a question is because it's going to prompt, or it's going to have the same as that alert, but this time it's got to have an input field there. So we can just put something in there and we can send that data over, and then the JavaScript can actually interact with that data. But we need to create something else in order to hold the contents of that value that we've put in. Because right now, as we put something in, there's nothing that really can tie that information. So we're not really sure what the user has put in here. And with JavaScript, there actually is a way that we can pick that information up. So let's set up a variable. So we saw quickly in the previous example how we created some variables. In this lesson, I also want to go through what else we can do with variables and how we can name variables. So variables are created by indicating var, and variables, before we use them, we need to declare them. So if I was to do something like x equals y, so it doesn't have any context to where x is coming from. So even though it will still declare it, it's still going to understand that, well, the value of x is equal to 1, then it's still not the proper format, and in some browsers you're going to throw errors. So it's always a good idea to declare your variables prior to using them. And there's different types of variables that we're able to utilize. So over here we've got an example of a number variable. So this is just numeric or integer. So these are all any kind of numbers. There's other types of variables that are more commonly used. So these would be a string, so we could indicate that a string. And strings need to have quotes around them. So you can do a single or you could do a double quote in order to contain all of the contents of the string. So I'm going to just do simple hello world and also have that semicolon there at the end so that we know that that statement has come to an end. So hello world is now the contents of this string, and we can actually output that within there. So maybe even better than putting hello world is I'll just give a value for string, what is your name, I'll place it into the prompt, and we're going to see that now this str is going to hold the value that we've told it to store. So this is a value of a example of a string. So now when I refresh it, we're going to see that y is actually, it's not defined because I took out y there, so I should actually remove that as well. So this is another good example of why you need to have console, because it just told me I had an error there. So really good to have that up and open as you're testing out your web pages and creating them. So here we've got what is your name. So it's actually using str contains the what is your name value, and then we can utilize it within our script. We also have another type of variable, so we've got a boolean. So boolean type value, so I'm going to just call it boo, and this is either a true or false value. So for now, let's set this up as true, and I'm going to comment this out, and this is boolean. So true or false, and this is another really useful one that's commonly used, and a really useful type of variable, because this allows us to hold different types of values, and then we can check to see if boo is either true or false, and then we can take action on it within our JavaScript. So a simple value of either 0 or 1 or true or false, however you interpret it, you can see if there's a value set, and you can apply conditions to this. And now whenever we can do some combinations of the prompt as well as variable settings. So now I can do something like this where I have variable response and equal that to the value of the prompt, and now you're going to see what happens when I place it within the console log. And check this out now. So whenever we got to cancel that and refresh it, and we see that we got this prompt. So now when I type in test, we get an output here within our console. So this just basically means that now response is holding the value that we had asked for within the prompt. And this is where we begin to see the real power of variables, and this is at the very core of what JavaScript is and what it does, is that we can set these variables and they can represent values that we can then utilize within our JavaScript. And we saw how now we can create a simple interaction, and we can hold the value whatever the user put in, and this way we can we can access this value at any time within our script. And it really does give us a lot of power that we can do with JavaScript. And we can even do combinations of the variables. So when we're setting response, we can do something like quote. So we can create a string. So we can do something like question was. We can attach that string, so concatenate it together with the plus sign, and then we can output the value of, so we're going to have the question was, and we've got the user's response there. So now whenever I go in, and one last time, let's type in test, and we can see question was, what is your name? Because the value of str is what is your name, and then test, so now the response is the value of both of these combined and the output from the user input. So next lesson, we're going to look at more ways that we can hold data within our JavaScript.